Graveyards should not exist and are a waste of space. Everybody who dies should be cremated. Graveyards are a waste of space and people should be remembered with stories, paintings, photos etc. of when they were alive and happy, not where their rotting corpse lies. The space taken up by graveyards around the world could be used instead amazing parks, public spaces etc. for new memories to be made by new generations. Cremate them all and be done with it.
Treepod. That's how I want to go. Grow me into a big oak tree, cut me down, make a barrel out of me and fill me with bourbon for 15 years.
I agree with you in theory. But where I am, Metro Boston, the old graveyards are some of the most beautiful open spaces we have. I love walking through them. If you rezoned them, we just end up with more condos, CV says, and Dunkin' Donuts.
I notice a lot of the people on the anti-cemetery side in the comments are talking about what they'd want for their own bodies after they die. I used to feel like that. I don't really care what happens to my body after I die. I'm not using it anymore. So it was easier for me to have opinions like cemeteries being a waste of space, not wanting my family to spend the money, etc. Then my son died when he was 3 years old, and I buried him. I'm not religious at all, so I just did what I felt like I needed to do at that time and that was what felt right to me. It's such a personal thing. Everyone is different, but it would have been really hard for me to have his body cremated. The cemetery where he's buried is really beautiful and I visit often. I'm grateful to have this place where I can go to be alone and think about him. So my opinion now with respect to my own body is that if there are people who will grieve when I die, they can do whatever they feel like they need to do with my body.
While I agree with you for the most part, and things like cemeteries would make great public spaces, I'd wager the vast majority of towns would still make it a commercial area. For example, I'd bet my left nut that my hometown would put up another freaking hotel on every cemetery, given the chance. So you've got a great practice, in theory. I just don't think the money-hungry world we live in would use that space to improve anything but their wallet size. Not all towns, cities, but I stand by the majority. As a side note, being buried is a scam anyway. Most all of those caskets break once buried. And even if they make it past the dirt being tamped down, they still disintegrate and are destroyed shortly after. The whole burial thing is about nothing but money, anymore.
Let's be honest, given the free space, they'd all be turned into condos. I do agree that there are better things to do with the space, but that's for a utopian reality we don't live in. The amount of upvotes this post has gotten has led me to believe this isn't an unpopular opinion to begin with.
Not something I've thought about before, but you make a good point. About the only counter-argument I can think of is that people want to be able to visit the gravesites of their loved ones and pay respects. I want to be cremated anyway though.
I literally do not care if I'm placed in a cardboard box and thrown off a cliff. What the frick am I gonna need my dead body for?
I mean, I just don't see why graveyards in particular seem to bother you. If you compare the land used in graveyard to the sheer volume of underdeveloped or otherwise disused land, it's a drop in the ocean. Plus the climate factor of burning stuff is unattractive. People should be able to have spaces to pay respects to the dead, mostly for their own mental well-being. It harms no one. I personally find the societal movement towards this aggressively utilitarian outlook to be cold and unfeeling in a society that desperately needs more kindness. Just let people live and die how they want, do no harm and don't impose on others.
I don't see an issue with burying people who want that, but I don't understand why pumping them full of chemicals and putting them in fancy boxes is necessary. Corpses don't need to look pretty, they're dead. Who are they supposed to impress down there? No amount of formaldehyde and makeup will stop them from rotting. Trying to resist the natural order of things is an exercise in futility.
Cemeteries are really peaceful places for walks and runs, and we see deer and other wildlife. There are also moments when I see a headstone that is 80+ years old and does not seem to be cared for any longer, or both spouses' names are on it, and I wonder if there are any of the later generations that are still connected to them. It gives me pause and a sense of my own mortality and our place in the universal timeline. I rarely feel the need to rush home and attend to the awaiting work emails and other trivial priorities we force upon ourselves. I guess they provide me with an opportunity to reflect and keep a perspective on life.
Cemeteries are actually very relaxing and peaceful places to walk. Much more quiet than a park, with beautiful statues and memorials to loved ones.
You can go to the cemetery and have a nice picnic. When I go to them for a nice long walk, I see others doing their runs and walking their dogs. I think people are too scared to go to them because of all the dead bodies, but are perfectly fine swimming at the beach like a water isn't filled with dead or decaying humans and animals.
Frick that. If you want to buy the property, it's yours. The idea that graveyards would turn into some utopian perfect landscape of parks and public space doesn't make sense. It would probably end up being a McDonald's, Walmart, or parking lot with a crappy mini-mall development.
I don't think letting people practice a death ritual and have a physical place to represent their loss is necessarily a waste. It may not be practical, but it certainly isn't a waste.
Here we go with this again. This shows up at least monthly, and considering the cremation rate in a lot of states in the US is over 50%, it's certainly not unpopular with the majority. Green burial when done properly releases much less carbon. But sometimes this platform is like ordering a menu item from Taco Bell. The same 5 ingredients prepared in a slightly different way.
Cremation is standard in Japan, but they still have graveyards there. How you handle the body isn't going to change the demand for graveyards. They are there for the living to have a place to remember the dead.
I don't think cremation is a better option given how toxic and energy-intensive the process is. Just bury under a tree and let nature do its thing.
Some religious practices or personal beliefs constitute a burial though. We wouldn't have the pyramids in Giza or the terracotta warriors without them. Hell, we wouldn't have half the stories we do today without a body present. And what about the ashes? Some people want to be in a mausoleum as ashes. Graveyards are a necessary thing to help grieving people feel better about where the physical body is, reasonable or not.
Get rid of all the golf courses first.
You need to get out of the big city and see how much space the country actually has.
Completely disagree. They're not just a place to put the dead. My local cemetery is an excellent dog park, place to hike, or just a peaceful place to get away from the living in very urban areas.
Imagine like 500 years from now when it's normal and mainstream for everyone to be cremated when they die, and how kids will be freaked out when they learn that there are places on the earth with dead bodies buried.
Graveyards are some of the nicest parks and public spaces.
Well, good thing it's not up to you.
People are free to worship whatever religion they want and have their remains be taken care of in whatever way they wish. If people buy vast acreage that's theirs and they choose to sell their land in lots for a graveyard, they are free to do so. These are private exchanges and private choices you have no say over. You may not like it, but ultimately it's none of your business.
I don't want to be frickin' cremated.
I understand where you're coming from. I also lost my mother 4 years ago, and I find it comforting to have a place able to physically visit her.
Unless you're a victim of murder. Given how many times people have been dug up and have new evidence found is interesting.
Funeral intern here. I have nothing against any method of disposition. I understand what you're saying about burial. When you break it down, you're exactly right. You're in a box, inside of another box, in the ground, rotting. Not a pleasant thought. Cremation is nice because you're not decaying, and your family members can keep you close. My only issue with it is that, though your relatives are responsible for your body forever. If your urn breaks, it'll be like losing you all over again. Not to mention, it must be difficult to vacuum a loved one out of the carpet. If your urn survives wear and tear for generations, eventually you'll end up in your great-great-great-grand-something's attic, maybe to be sold at a yard sale.
Could you people STFU already? We get it, average Redditor. You think weddings, having children's and graveyards are useless. You don't like public proposals, and you think that hamburgers should be wider, not taller. You don't have to make posts about the same topics every single week. FFS.
Burning every corpse would be a huge waste of energy and resources. Burying someone at least gives something back to nature, ashes do not.
How about we start with golf courses, then we can worry about exhuming the dead.
I believe there is a cultural aspect to it. Religions which evolved in places with high natural resources and fauna would cremate. India, South America's religions evolved from Jerusalem. Islam, Christianity, Hebrew, which was essentially desert, had no wood to burn every time someone died, so would just bury instead.
JFC, can't you even let the dead rip?
I want to be a diamond. At least I can be beautiful after I die, man. Pretty rock.
For a lot of religions, including Judaism, this doesn't work. It's traumatic for a lot of Jews to even consider cremation. So while your idea of freeing up space is interesting, I don't find it practical or very empathetic to people who want to visit their loved ones.
This is just such a dumb wannabe big brain take. I have to assume Op is in middle school.
You don't realize just how vast the earth is and how much land is undeveloped.
Kinda heartless and naive emo. It helps to have a physical place to grieve, relive experiences. I bet you're okay with euthanasia for anyone deemed to be non-productive. Am I right?
Agree to disagree. I think if folks want a natural burial, let them. I want one in a tree to be planted with me.
Burial of the dead has roots with Homo habilis and can be definitely traced to Neanderthals, and is most likely the oldest of human traditions still in use. Neanderthal graves show ritualistic behavior indicating a religious element, and one of the ways archaeologists determine if an ancient site was religious in nature is if graves are either found nearby, which they indicate would mean it was or not nearby, indicating it had some other purpose. Cremation, on the other hand, is more modern, and actually very harmful to the earth. Graveyards may seem to be a waste of space, but by comparison they're actually better for the earth and serve a higher, more spiritual purpose. Also, many people who are cremated buy burial plots that either their urn is buried at, their ashes are scattered at, or are never used, so that a headstone can be placed there as a place for family, friends, or relatives can come to.
Why not throw people in the woods and feed the coyotes?
Crematoriums use a lot of energy and produce carbon emissions. Everybody who dies should be eaten by the living.
You like CO2, because that's what cremation does. Cryogenically freezing doesn't do that.
There are so many alternatives now that graveyards do seem wasteful. I recommend anyone who is okay with it to donate their body to science. I'm a pre-donor at the Tennessee Body Farm for forensic research, and I'm excited for my body to have a purpose once I'm gone. There are a lot of things you can do with your body once you die. It's definitely worth looking into all the available options.
False. They should be turned into compost for my beets.
Graveyards are parks, spend some time in one, just be respectful.
Cremation is a waste of resources and big creator of greenhouse gases. Everybody who dies should be dumped in nature to be torn apart by scavengers. It's the most natural way.
Has any entrepreneur stepped up and created a carbon-neutral, solar-powered cremation process? An array of large magnifying lenses with enough concentrated sunlight to burn up bodies would save on gas or electric power. They would have to be huge, maybe 6 feet diameter each, and at least a dozen of these arranged above the body. It could be a human-scaled version of burning bugs with a magnifying glass. I'm not an engineer, but it seems like this would be feasible with enough lenses. Maybe it's already been done.
Everyone who dies should be launched by trebuchet into Mitch McConnell's bedroom window at 3 a.m.
Congrats, that a truly unpopular opinion. It's also one of the most callous and casually ignorant and obscenely offensive things I think I've ever heard. To tell the entire human race that they can no longer have literally one of the most sacred and psychological, emotional, spiritually important spaces available in existence because you don't personally find them beneficial. I don't think I would have been able to cope with the deaths of some of the closest people in my life without having a physical place of remembrance for them. Like, wait, do you not realize how many graves are? Literally just markers for bodies that were cremated. You don't actually think every grave you see in a graveyard has a corpse underneath it, do you? Cause who boy, do I have some news for you, dude.
As a cemetery enthusiast who spends a good bit of her time cataloging graves, I believe a massive "shut up" is in order here.
Obviously we can't fault the logic here, but cemeteries do have sentimental value. Also remember that burying the dead is a practice that originated when overpopulation wasn't a problem. It's a relic of a bygone age, in this respect.
Cremated in Viking's funeral bring together 100 corpses, 1 boat and fire.
This post is exactly same as saying, why use tap water when we can buy bottled water, we should stop drinking tap water. Quote.
Graveyards are organic, whereas cremation creates air pollution.
First, donate all your organs. Second, feed your body to vultures, i.e., sky burial. It sounds a bit weird and harsh, but it's way better than cremating as there is no pollution, and plus you are feeding someone. Tibetan and Parsi cultures follow it.
Why not just remove the stigma from cemeteries and enjoy them as public spaces to honor the dead instead of scary places full of stones with names on them?
Bullcrap, they should be tree food in the bag for trees being planted. Google it, it's a thing. Way better atmospherically as it doesn't pollute like cremation, yet at the same time it does that. It pulls pollution out by growing the tree. Did I change your mind?
More importantly, a pile of ashes can't rise from the dead and steal my girlfriend again.
I very much agree, to an extent. The only exception to this I think would be the bodies of those involved in cold cases or unsolved murders. This may be a bit morbid, but science and technology have come a long way. There are some very specific scenarios where law enforcement might need access to a body in order to solve a case.
Private business with customers willing to pay. Don't see the issue.
Cremation is not simple, and has an impact on the environment. People should be buried, naturally, no chemicals. Then let the body decompose, then bury the next one. No need to have one grave site for one person for years.
We got space. Let the earth eat.
Cremation isn't a healthy solution for the environment. The circle of life requires the decomposition of bodies as it creates nitrogen. I want to be buried in a shawl, without being embalmed. Let the worms eat me and feed the trees.
I saw this cool thing somewhere where apparently your dead body can be stuffed in a sack and become tree food. That way there's still a tree that you can go visit for a loved one and not a piece of cement sticking out of the ground.
If I remember correctly, they were designed at some point to be exactly the thing you're talking about. lush green lawns, shade trees, benches, a nice place to spend time reflecting. In the further reaches of this new approach, it was imagined and promoted as a place for the family to spend the day. The magnificent architecture of old tombs and crypts is not like anything else. They're a part of our culture and vary just as much from one to the next. It might come as a surprise to you that in order to bury an urn in some cemeteries you still have to purchase the vault, the concrete box the coffin lays in. This is a sanitary measure.
Many religions disagree with you, but I don't know if it is an unpopular opinion. Especially on Reddit.
Unpopular indeed.
This is exactly how things are done in Japan. You get cremated. That is the only option. You can get buried after cremation, but there's too little space for your body. They only sell skinny headstones and they are placed super close together. The only difference from what OP wanted is that the space they didn't use up by doing this is now used for additional housing, building, not parks.
I want to be buried all natural. No embalming fluids, no casket, no tombstone or marker, just a thin degradable sheet around me for modesty. Straight into the ground, decompose back to nature as life does.
Sniff sniff smells like communism to me.
Before you cremate, organ donation should be an opt-out, versus an opt-in. 2-time organ transplant recipient. It is the greatest gift you can give someone. When I die, anything on me that can be used to help better someone that is sick, I want them to have it. After that, who cares?
I used to advocate for cremation, and yeah, it would free up a lot of space for other things. But think about what would have happened if dinosaurs had been cremated, and their bodies not available for compressing and turning into oil. All mass and energy goes somewhere, and I guess I'd rather save the energy of my mass for, hopefully, something like cooking a meal, going to the doctor, etc.
Jesus Christ.
Turn me into a tree, launch me into space, or donate my body to science. I don't care which. Harvest whatever organs can be donated to someone who needs them, but seriously don't buy me a $6,000 wooden box just to put me in the dirt.
Composting is way better.
Graveyards have certain archaeological significance, just so you're aware. How somebody died might not be all that important right now, and it certainly may not be as accurate now that cremation is such a popular option for corpse disposal. But human burial sites do serve at least one purpose.
Filling human bodies with chemicals to mummify them is disgusting and profane. At least give the earth something to consume and recycle.
A slightly less unpopular opinion. Donate. So many folks looking for organ donors. You are dead, lease is up, donate so somebody could benefit.
400 kilograms of CO2 per cremation. Idiot.
Are you Americans? Would you say the same about vets? Or those who died in service? Also, why even cremate them? Just toss them over in the ocean if you were being so efficient about it.
You lost me at cremating everyone. Just do natural burials, give back to the earth when you go.